A little girl returns lost phone. Years later, she heirs an empire. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The wind howled through the cracked windows of the tiny apartment as little Hannah hugged her knees on the worn-out sofa. Her fingers were numb, despite the gloves stitched from old socks. Her mother, Carol, had just returned from her second shift, her face pale with exhaustion. The heating hadn't worked for days, and their only dinner was stale bread soaked in water. "I'm sorry, baby," her mother whispered, brushing Hannah's hair. "I'll try to bring home something warm tomorrow." Hannah just nodded. She was used to hunger. At 8 years old, Hannah Montgomery knew more about survival than most adults. Their one-bedroom apartment in South Chicago was always cold in winter, the pipes groaning in protest against the biting frost. Outside, the city glittered with Christmas lights and promise, but none of that warmth seemed to find its way to their doorstep. Hannah watched her breath form tiny clouds in the dim light of their living room, which also served as her bedroom when night fell. Carol Montgomery wasn't just tired, she was bone-weary from the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your soul. A widow for 3 years now, she worked as a waitress during the day and cleaned offices at night. Today, her second employer had cut. Her hours again, budget constraints, they'd said, not meeting her eyes. "Mama, I can skip school tomorrow and help you," Hannah offered, her serious brown eyes too mature for her small face. "Absolutely not," Carol replied, summoning a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. "Your education is everything, Hannah. It's your ticket out of here." She tucked a strand of Hannah's dark hair behind her ear. "Besides, Mrs. Peterson said she'd watch you again tonight while I'm at the restaurant." Hannah frowned. Mrs. Peterson was their elderly neighbor who smelled of mothballs and disappointment. But she didn't argue. She knew better than to make things harder for her mother. Later that evening, there was a change of plans. Mrs. Peterson called, complaining of a bad back. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you'll have to come with me tonight," Carol said, wrapping Hannah in an extra sweater. "You can sit in the back office and do your homework. Mr. Laurent won't mind as long as you're quiet." The Crystal Room was unlike anywhere Hannah had ever been. Located in downtown Chicago, it catered to the city's elite, politicians, business, moguls and celebrities who didn't blink at paying $100 for a steak. The chandeliers alone probably cost more than their entire apartment building. Carol led Hannah through the service entrance, nodding at the security guard, who pretended not to see the child. The back office was really a glorified storage closet with a desk, but it was warm. Hannah settled in with her worn backpack, extracting a tattered library book and her homework. "I'll check on you between tables," Carol promised, straightening her black uniform. "Stay here and be good." Hannah nodded solemnly. "I will, Mama." For 2 hours, Hannah diligently completed her math problems and read her book. When hunger gnawed at her stomach, she drank water from a paper cup and tried to ignore it. Through the small window in the door, she could see glimpses of the dining room, crystal glasses catching light, women with diamond earrings that sparkled like stars, men in suits that probably cost more than their rent. It was nearing 9 o'clock when Hannah's curiosity got the better of her. She'd finished her homework and the characters in her book weren't interesting enough to keep her attention. Quietly, she opened the office door and peeked into the kitchen. It was a flurry of activity, chefs calling orders, waitstaff balancing trays, the hiss of steam and clang of pots creating a symphony of organized chaos. No one noticed the small girl slipping through, her eyes wide at the sight of so much food. Hannah had never seen such abundance, glistening steaks, towers of seafood, and desserts that looked like works of art. Her stomach contracted painfully. She didn't mean to wander into the dining room, but the swinging doors were open, and she found herself standing at the edge of luxury. That's when she saw him. He stood out even in this crowd, tall, confident, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a watch that gleamed under the chandeliers. His salt and pepper hair was immaculately styled, and when he spoke, everyone at his table leaned in. He was barking into his phone about investments and market shares, his voice carrying an air of authority that made even the waiters approach cautiously. Hannah watched, mesmerized, as he abruptly ended his call, threw some bills on the table, and stood to leave. In his haste, something black and sleek fell from his coat pocket, landing soundlessly on the plush carpet. A phone, the newest model, one she'd seen advertised on billboards but never up close. No one else noticed. The man strode toward the exit, his companions scrambling to follow. Hannah moved without thinking. She darted across the dining room, scooped up the phone and followed him. She was vaguely aware of her mother calling her name in alarm, but she was already pushing through the revolving doors into the bitter December night. "Mister, wait, you dropped this," she called, her voice small against the wind and traffic. The man turned, surprise evident on his face, as the small, underdressed girl ran toward him, holding his expensive phone aloft like a trophy. "You dropped." "Your phone, sir?" Hannah said, slightly out of breath as she held it out to him. He took it slowly, studying her with intense blue eyes. "You could have kept it," he said, his voice deep and curious. "It's worth quite a lot of money." Hannah shook her head, her expression serious. "It's not mine," she replied simply. "My mama says we don't steal even when we're hungry." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. He looked past her to where Carol had rushed out, her face a mask of panic that softened to relief when she saw her daughter safe. "Is that your mother?" he asked. Hannah nodded. "What's your name?" "Hannah Montgomery, sir." He pocketed his phone and extended his hand formally, as if she were an adult worthy of respect. "I'm Uriah Stern. It's a pleasure to meet someone with such integrity. Hannah Montgomery." Hannah's small hand disappeared into his large one. His grip was warm and firm. Carol reached them slightly out of breath. "Hannah, you can't run off like that." She turned to the man, apology written across her features. "I'm so sorry if she bothered you, sir. She's supposed to be in the back." "On the contrary," Mr. Stern replied, "your daughter just returned my phone. Very valuable both in price and content." He studied Carol, her worn uniform, the shadows under her eyes, the way she protectively placed her hand on Hannah's shoulder. "You work here?" "Yes, sir, I'm a server." Carol's voice held a note of defensiveness. Mr. Stern reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'd like to speak with you both tomorrow at my office." He held up a hand as Carol began to protest. "Nothing improper, I assure you. Just a conversation. Say 2 o'clock?" The card he handed her was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. "Uriah Stern, CEO, Pinnacle Investments." "We couldn't possibly—" Carol began. "Please," he interrupted, his voice gentler. "It's important, and I promise it will be worth your time." Before Carol could respond, Mr. Stern's driver pulled up in a sleek black car. He nodded to them both, then hesitated. "Your daughter's actions tonight are rarer than you might think," he said quietly. "In my experience, it's the people with the least who often give the most." With that cryptic statement, he disappeared into the car, which glided away into the Chicago night. Carol stared at the business card, then at her daughter's hopeful face. "Can we go, Mama?" Hannah asked. Carol sighed, tucking the card into her pocket. "We'll see, sweetheart, we'll see." That night, as Hannah curled under their thin blankets, she couldn't sleep. The man's face kept appearing in her mind, not because of his obvious wealth, but because of the way he'd looked at her. Like she mattered. Like returning his phone was an act of extraordinary courage rather than simple honesty. "Mama," she whispered into the darkness, "do you think Mr. Stern is a nice man?" From the other side of the pull-out couch, Carol's voice came soft and thoughtful. "I don't know, baby. Rich people don't usually notice people like us unless they want something." What could he want from us? Carol didn't answer for a long moment. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "But I guess we'll find out tomorrow." Hannah smiled into her pillow. Tomorrow. Something to look forward to, a rare luxury in their world of day-to-day survival. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the grime of the city in a pristine blanket of white. Change was in the air, as delicate and transformative as the crystalline flakes drifting past their window. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The Pinnacle Investments building dominated the Chicago skyline, its glass exterior reflecting the winter sun like a massive diamond. Hannah craned her neck to see the top as they approached, her worn boots slipping slightly on the salted sidewalk. "It's so tall," she breathed. Carol gripped her daughter's hand tighter, her other hand clutching her purse. Inside was Mr. Stern's business card, slightly creased from being taken out and examined multiple times. After a sleepless night weighing her options, curiosity had finally won out over caution. "Remember what I told you," Carol said as they approached the revolving doors. "We hear what he has to say, we thank him politely, and then we leave. No lingering, no asking for anything." Hannah nodded, though her eyes were wide with excitement. She'd never been inside a building like this. The security guard at the front desk raised an eyebrow at their appearance. Carol in her best outfit, a navy blue dress that had seen better days, and Hannah in her cleanest jeans and the sweater she wore for school pictures. But when Carol mentioned Mr. Stern's name, everything changed. "Of course," the guard said, his demeanor instantly respectful. "Mr. Stern is expecting you. 50th floor, main elevator." The elevator was lined with mirrors and brass, making Hannah feel like she was standing inside a jewelry box. As they ascended, she watched the numbers climb higher than she could count. "Mama," she whispered, "what does Mr. Stern do?" Carol's reflection looked nervous in the mirrored walls. "He's an investor. He makes money by helping businesses grow." "Is he very rich?" "Yes," Carol said simply, "very." At the 50th floor, the elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area bigger than their entire apartment. The walls were lined with abstract paintings, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. A sleek receptionist greeted them with a professional smile. "Mrs. Montgomery and Hannah, Mr. Stern is waiting for you right this way." Hannah had expected a big office, but Mr. Stern's space was relatively modest. Warm wood paneling, bookshelves filled with actual books, and a large desk positioned to take advantage of the spectacular view of Lake Michigan. The man himself stood when they entered, coming around to greet them. "Thank you for coming," he said, shaking Carol's hand, and then Hannah's with equal formality. "Please sit." They settled into comfortable leather chairs, while Mr. Stern took a seat not behind his imposing desk, but in an identical chair facing them, eliminating the physical barrier. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here," he began, his blue eyes studying them both. Carol nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." "Please, call me Uriah." He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Montgomery." "Ms.," Carol corrected automatically. "My husband passed away 3 years ago." Something flickered in Uriah's eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Montgomery. I want to make your daughter an offer." Carol tensed visibly. "What kind of offer?" "A scholarship," he replied. "A full academic scholarship to Lakeside Academy, from elementary through high school graduation, plus a monthly stipend to cover living expenses, adequate housing, and a college fund." The silence that followed was absolute. Hannah looked between her mother's shocked face and Mr. Stern's calm one, not fully comprehending what was being offered. Carol found her voice first. "Why?" The word was barely audible. Uriah's expression softened. "Because your daughter showed me something rare last night. Integrity. In my business, that quality is more valuable than gold, and more scarce." Carol's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You don't even know us. This must be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nobody gives that kind of money to strangers without expecting something in return." Instead of being offended, Uriah nodded, as if he'd anticipated this reaction. "You're right to be cautious, but I assure you this comes with no hidden agenda." He stood and walked to the window, his back to them for a moment. When he turned, his expression was distant, remembering. "When I was 10 years old, my mother and I lived in a car for 6 months after my father abandoned us. One day, a teacher noticed I was wearing the same clothes every day and offered to help. That teacher paid for an apartment deposit, bought us groceries, and connected my mother with a job. He changed our lives not because we deserved it, but because he believed everyone deserves a chance." Uriah's gaze returned to the present, focusing on Hannah. "I made a promise that if I ever succeeded, I would do the same for someone else. Your daughter's actions last night reminded me of that promise." Carol remained silent, her expression unreadable. Uriah returned to his seat. I understand your hesitation. Take some time to think about it. Discuss it privately. He slid a folder across the small table between them. Here's everything in writing, including contact information for 3 other families I've helped over the years. You're welcome to speak with them. Hannah, who had been quietly taking everything in, finally spoke. Would I have to leave my school? Leave my friends? Uriah considered her question seriously. Lakeside Academy is across town from where you live now. You'd have new teachers and make new friends, but, he added, seeing her expression fall, you could certainly stay in touch with your current friends. Carol placed a protective hand on Hannah's shoulder. This is overwhelming. We need time to think. Of course, Uriah agreed. Take all the time you need. He hesitated, then added, one more thing. This offer is not charity, Ms. Montgomery. It's an investment in Hannah's potential. I believe she has a bright future ahead of her, and I'd like to help clear the path. Nothing more. As they rode the elevator back down, Hannah studied her mother's troubled face. Mama, are you mad? Carol sighed, kneeling to Hannah's level despite the cramped space. No, baby, I'm confused and a little scared. Why, Mr. Stern seems nice. Sometimes, Carol said carefully, things that seem too good to be true usually are. But as they emerged onto the busy street, the cold air biting at their cheeks, Hannah couldn't help but feel a flutter of hope. For the first time in her young life, someone besides her mother believed she was special. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown, terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. 2 weeks later, after Carol had vetted every detail and spoken to each reference family, they returned to Pinnacle Investments. This time Hannah noticed how Uriah's face lit up when they entered, as if their arrival was the highlight of his day. You've made a decision? He asked, trying to mask his eagerness. Carol nodded, her face solemn but resolved. We accept your offer, Mr. Stern, with profound gratitude. Uriah extended his hand, first to Carol, then to Hannah. I promise you, won't regret this. Hannah took his large hand in her small one, feeling the weight of the moment. Thank you, sir, I'll make you proud. Uriah smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his features. I believe you will, Hannah. In fact, I'm counting on it. That evening, as they walked home through the gently falling snow, Hannah skipped ahead, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind her, Carol watched her daughter with a mixture of hope and trepidation. They were stepping into uncharted territory, placing their trust in a stranger's generosity. It was a leap of faith, but for Hannah's sake, Carol was willing to jump. What neither of them could know as they made their way home to pack up their meager belongings was that this day would come to mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would transform not just their lives but the lives of countless others in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The first months were the hardest. Lakeside Academy stood on 20 acres of manicured grounds, its brick buildings steeped in tradition and privilege. Hannah's new classmates arrived each morning in luxury SUVs driven by parents or nannies, their designer backpacks untouched by wear, their confidence born of never knowing want. Hannah's first day was a study in contrasts. Her second-hand uniform hung slightly loose on her small frame, and though it was clean and pressed, it lacked the effortless crispness of her classmates' attire. Her hands, which had helped her mother, scrub floors and wash dishes, were rough compared to the soft, manicured fingers of the girls who sat beside her. Where do you live? Asked a blonde girl named Sophia during lunch, her tone more curious than friendly. Parkview Apartments, Hannah answered, naming the complex where she and her mother had recently moved, a substantial upgrade from their previous home, but still modest compared to her classmates' residences. Never heard of it, Sophia replied, with a dismissive shrug, turning back to her friends. That afternoon, when Carol picked her up in their used Honda, another upgrade courtesy of Uriah's stipend, Hannah was unusually quiet. How was your first day? Carol asked, noting her daughter's subdued demeanor. Hannah stared out the window at the sprawling homes they passed. Different, she finally said. Different good or different bad? Hannah considered this. Just different. The library has more books than I've ever seen, and we had real orange juice at lunch, not the powdered kind. Carol waited, sensing there was more. But I don't think the other kids like me, Hannah added in a small voice. They kept asking why I was there, like I didn't belong. Carol's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You belong there just as much as they do. Mr. Stern chose you because he saw something special in you, something those other kids might not have, even with all their fancy things. Hannah nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. That evening, while Hannah was doing her homework, the phone rang. It was Uriah checking in on Hannah's first day. Carol hesitated before sharing Hannah's difficulties. It's to be expected, Uriah said, his voice thoughtful. Hannah is bridging two worlds. It won't always be easy, but if anyone can do it, she can. I'm not sure, Carol admitted. Maybe this was a mistake. She was happy at her old school. Give it time, Uriah urged, and perhaps I can help. May I speak with her? Hannah took the phone nervously. Hello? Hannah, it's Mr. Stern. I'm told your first day was challenging. A little, she admitted. The work isn't hard, but... She trailed off. But fitting in is, Uriah finished for her. I understand. I felt the same way when I first entered the business world, like everyone knew some secret code that I'd never been taught. Hannah's grip on the phone tightened. Yes, exactly. Would you like to know what helped me? Yes, please. I realized that while everyone else was born into that world, I had earned my place in it. That made me different, yes, but also stronger. You see, Hannah, when something is given to you, it's easy to take it for granted. But when you've had to work for it, you value it more deeply. Hannah considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. But I didn't earn Lakeside, you gave it to me. So you earned it the moment you ran after me with my phone, Uriah countered. That action revealed your character, Hannah, and character is something no amount of money can buy. After they hung up, Hannah sat at the kitchen table, her homework, forgotten as she replayed Uriah's words. There was truth in what he said. She was different from her classmates, but maybe different wasn't bad. Maybe different could be powerful. The next morning, Hannah walked into her classroom with her head held high. When Sophia made a snide comment about her worn shoes, Hannah simply smiled. I like your shoes too, she said genuinely. They're very pretty. Sophia blinked, caught, off guard by the compliment, instead of the defensive response she'd expected. By the end of the first semester, Hannah had found her footing. Her natural intelligence, combined with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, placed her at the top of her class. Teachers noted her exceptional work ethic and curiosity. While she hadn't exactly made friends, she had earned a grudging respect from her peers. But it was her relationship with Uriah that truly flourished. What began as monthly check-ins evolved into weekly dinners. Uriah, a lifelong bachelor with no children of his own, found in Hannah a kindred spirit, someone who saw the world not as it was but as it could be. He introduced her to museums, symphony concerts, and the theatre. Hannah absorbed these experiences like a sponge, but never lost her appreciation for simpler pleasures. She could discuss Renaissance art with the same enthusiasm as her favorite, cartoons. One evening, after a performance of The Nutcracker, Uriah drove them home, listening as Hannah chattered about the ballet. I've never seen anything so beautiful, she sighed, her eyes still dreamy with the memory of dancing snowflakes. Uriah glanced at her thoughtfully. Beauty comes in many forms, Hannah. Sometimes it's as grand as a ballet, and sometimes it's as simple as a child's honesty. Hannah turned to him, suddenly serious. Mr. Stern, can I ask you something? Of course. Why don't you have a family, a wife or children? The question, innocent but direct, caught Uriah off guard. He was silent for a moment before answering. I suppose I was always too busy building my company, and then when I had the time it seemed too late. Do you regret it? Hannah pressed. Uriah's expression softened. I used to, but not anymore. As they pulled up to the Montgomerys' apartment, the unsaid hung between them, that perhaps in their own way they had become a kind of family. Not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. It wasn't until Hannah's 10th birthday that the fragile balance of their new life faced its first real test. Uriah had arranged a small party at an upscale restaurant, inviting several of Hannah's classmates. To Hannah's surprise and delight, most of them came bearing expensive gifts and curious glances at the man who had taken such an interest in a girl they'd once dismissed. Midway through the celebration, as Hannah was opening her presents, Sophia leaned over to another girl and whispered, just loud enough to be heard, "My mum says Mr. Stern is only helping Hannah because he feels guilty about something. Or maybe he's secretly her real dad." The room fell silent. Hannah froze, a half-unwrapped gift in her hands, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Across the table, Carol's face drained of color. Before either of them could react, Uriah spoke, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "Sophia, isn't it? Please convey to your mother that my relationship with Hannah and Ms. Montgomery is based on mutual respect and admiration, and while gossip may be entertaining, it's rarely accurate or kind." Sophia shrank in her seat, properly chastised. Uriah turned to Hannah, his expression softening. "Now I believe there are more presents waiting to be opened." The moment passed, but its impact lingered. That night, after all the guests had gone and Hannah was asleep, Carol confronted Uriah in the living room of their apartment. "This can't continue," she said, her voice low but intense. "People are talking, creating rumors about us, about you and Hannah. It's not right." Uriah's expression was troubled. "Would you prefer I step back? Reduce my involvement to financial support only?" Carol hesitated, torn between protecting her daughter's reputation and acknowledging the positive influence Uriah had become in their lives. "I don't know," she admitted. "Hannah adores you. You've opened up a whole new world for her." "And she has done the same for me," Uriah said, quietly. "But I understand your concerns. Perhaps we should be more discreet." They agreed to fewer public outings, more structured interactions, but the rumors persisted, evolving and gathering momentum in the whispers of school hallways and charity galas. By the time Hannah turned 12, the speculation had taken on a life of its own. What stayed with Hannah from that night wasn't the gossip or the discomfort. It was the way Uriah had defended her without hesitation, the unwavering certainty in his voice when he spoke of their relationship. It was a validation she carried close to her heart, a shield against the increasingly pointed questions and sidelong glances. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Hannah sat in Uriah's office, working on a particularly challenging math assignment while he attended a meeting down the hall. She'd begun spending time there after school, finding the quiet space more conducive to concentration than her bustling middle school campus. Lost in a problem involving algebraic equations, she barely registered the office door opening. Assuming it was Uriah returning, she didn't look up until an unfamiliar voice spoke. Well, so this is the famous Hannah Montgomery." Hannah raised her head to find a man approximately Uriah's age, but where Uriah was lean and sharp-featured, this man was softly rounded, with thinning hair and eyes that didn't match his smile. "Who are you?" Hannah asked, instinctively, guarded. "Victor Reynolds. Uriah and I go way back. We started in this business together." The man moved further into the office, examining the space with a proprietary air. "So you're the charity case everyone's talking about?" "The little girl who returned a phone and won the lottery." Hannah carefully closed her textbook. "Mr. Stern should be back soon if you'd like to wait for him." Victor chuckled, the sound lacking any warmth. "Oh, I know exactly where Uriah is. Board meeting, third floor, should last another 40 minutes at least." He settled into Uriah's chair, swiveling slightly. "Which gives us time to get acquainted." Hannah's discomfort increased. "I should probably—" "Do you know why Uriah's doing all this for you?" Victor interrupted, gesturing broadly to encompass Hannah's education, their improved living situation. "Everything. Has he told you about Elizabeth?" The name was unfamiliar. Hannah shook her head. Interesting. Elizabeth was his fiancée, about 20 years ago. Brilliant woman, scientist, humanitarian, the whole package. She was pregnant. When she died in a car accident, the baby, a girl, died too. Hannah sat very still, the information washing over her like cold water. "You would have been about the same age as his daughter," Victor continued, his eyes calculating. "Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say?" Before Hannah could respond, the office door opened again, and Uriah entered. His expression shifted instantly from distraction to cold fury when he saw Victor. "Reynolds, what are you doing here?" Victor stood, straightening his jacket with exaggerated casualness. Just stopping by to catch up with an old friend. And meeting the famous Hannah, of course. Uriah moved to Hannah's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Hannah, would you mind waiting in the conference room? Margaret can get you a snack. Hannah gathered her books, relieved to escape the tension crackling between the two men. As she reached the door, she heard Victor's parting shot. She does. Look a bit like Elizabeth around the eyes, don't you think? Same determined expression. The door closed behind her, but not before she caught a glimpse of Uriah's face, a mixture of pain and rage that she'd never seen before. That evening, the ride home was silent. Hannah stared out the window, trying to organize her jumbled thoughts. "Is it true?" she finally asked as they neared their apartment. "About Elizabeth and the baby?" Uriah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Victor had no right to tell you that. But is it true?" Uriah pulled the car to the curb and turned to face her. "Yes, Elizabeth and I were engaged. She was pregnant with our daughter. They died 22 years ago." Hannah absorbed this, her young mind struggling with the implications. "And that's why you're helping me? Because I'm the same age your daughter would have been?" "No." Uriah's response was immediate and firm. "That's not why, Hannah. When you returned my phone that night, I saw something extraordinary. A child who chose honesty over opportunity, even in difficult circumstances. My decision to help you had nothing to do with Elizabeth. But would you have noticed me at all if it weren't for her? If you didn't keep wondering what your daughter might have been like?" The question hung between them, painful in its directness. Uriah's silence was answer enough. When Hannah finally went to bed that night, after explaining everything to her mother, she lay awake for hours. The revelation had shaken her foundation. Was she merely a replacement, a second chance for Uriah to experience fatherhood? Or was their connection genuine, based on who she was rather than who she resembled? Don't miss what happens next. Hannah's world is about to be turned upside down as she discovers the true extent of Victor's interference and Uriah's past. What secrets lie beneath the surface of Pinnacle Investments? Stay tuned to find out. Winter turned to spring, and the incident with Victor faded somewhat in Hannah's mind, though it had left an indelible mark on her relationship with Uriah. There was a new carefulness between them, a consciousness of boundaries that hadn't existed before. Their weekly dinners continued, but conversation remained light, focusing on school and current events rather than personal matters. Hannah, now 13 and in the 8th grade at Lakeside, had grown into a thoughtful, academically gifted student. Her initial difficulties with fitting in had largely resolved. While she wasn't part of the popular crowd, she had found her place among a small group of similarly studious classmates who valued intelligence over social status. One particularly chilly April afternoon, Hannah waited outside the school's main entrance for her mother, who was unusually late. Most of the other students had already departed, and the campus was quietly emptying. Just as she was considering calling home, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down to reveal Victor Reynolds. "Your mother called Uriah's office," he explained before Hannah could speak. "Car trouble. Uriah's out of town on business, so he asked me to give you a ride home." Hannah hesitated, her instincts warning her against getting into the car. "I can take the bus." Victor sighed dramatically. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot. I said things I shouldn't have, but that's water under the bridge now. Uriah and I have patched things up, and he specifically asked me to make sure you got home safely." Still uncertain, Hannah pulled out her phone. "I'll just call my mum to confirm." "Suit yourself," Victor shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. But when Hannah tried her mother's cell phone, there was no answer. After 3 attempts, she reluctantly slid into the back seat of Victor's car, keeping her backpack between them like a barrier. Instead of heading toward her apartment, however, Victor drove in the opposite direction. "Where are we going?" Hannah asked, alarm rising in her voice. "This isn't the way to my home." "Relax," Victor replied, his eyes meeting hers in the rear-view mirror. "I thought we could stop by my office first. There's something I want to show you, something about Uriah that you should know." Hannah's hand tightened around her phone. "I want to go home. Now, please." Victor's expression hardened. "I'm trying to help you, Hannah. Uriah isn't the saint." "You think he is. There are things about his business, about where his money comes from, that would shock you. I don't care, I want to go home. Victor ignored her, continuing to drive toward downtown Chicago. Hannah quickly sent a text to her mother, with Victor Reynolds. Says you had car trouble. Not going home. Help. Her finger hovered over the send button when Victor suddenly reached back and snatched the phone from her hands. That's enough of that, he said, his tone no longer carrying any pretense of friendliness. You're making this much harder than it needs to be, Hannah. Fear coursed through her, but Hannah forced herself to remain calm. She'd read enough stories to know that panicking wouldn't help. Mr. Reynolds, please take me home. My mother will be worried. Your mother knows exactly where you are, Victor replied, his eyes cold in the rearview mirror. This little charade Uriah's been playing with you both. It ends today. The sleek sedan pulled into the underground parking garage of a glass and steel building that Hannah didn't recognize. Unlike the warm, prestigious atmosphere of Pinnacle Investments, this structure had a cold, utilitarian feel. Get out, Victor instructed, opening her door. Hannah remained seated, her heart pounding. No, I want to call Mr. Stern. Victor's patience visibly thinned. Uriah is in London. By the time he gets back, this will all be resolved. Now you can either walk with me like a sensible person, or I can call security and have you escorted. Your choice. Seeing no immediate alternative, Hannah cautiously exited the car, staying as far from Victor as possible. He led her to a private elevator, which ascended silently to the 20th floor. The doors opened to reveal a minimalist office suite, with Reynolds Financial emblazoned on the wall in chrome letters. Sit, Victor gestured to a leather chair opposite a massive desk. Hannah perched on the edge of the seat, ready to bolt if necessary. What do you want from me? Victor settled into his chair with the air of a man about to savor a long-anticipated meal. It's quite simple, really. I want you to convince your mother to decline Uriah's latest offer. What offer? Ah, so he hasn't told you yet. Victor smiled thinly. Uriah is planning to make your mother the director of his new charitable foundation. Quite a step up from waiting tables, wouldn't you say? Hannah's confusion must have shown on her face because Victor continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You see, Hannah, Uriah has been using you both to launder his reputation. Pinnacle Investments has some questionable clients, the kind that draw unwanted attention from regulatory agencies. What better distraction than the heartwarming story of a successful businessman helping a struggling widow and her honest daughter? That's not true, Hannah retorted, though a seed of doubt had been planted. Mr. Stern helps us because he believes in me. Victor laughed, the sound sharp and unpleasant. Is that what he told you? Tell me, has he ever mentioned where his seed money came from? The clients he served before Pinnacle became legitimate. Before Hannah could respond, the office door burst open. 2 security guards entered, followed by Carol Montgomery, her face a mask of fury. Get away from my daughter, she demanded, rushing to Hannah's side. Victor seemed genuinely surprised. Ms. Montgomery, this is unexpected. I tracked Hannah's phone, Carol explained, holding her daughter protectively. When I saw she was here instead of at school, I called the police. They're on their way up. The color drained from Victor's face. There's been a misunderstanding. I was simply, save it for the officers, Carol cut him off. To the security guards, who seemed uncertain whose orders to follow, she added, This man took my minor daughter without permission. Either you detain him until the police arrive, or you'll be charged as accessories. The guards exchanged glances, then moved to position themselves between Victor and the door. Within the hour, Hannah and Carol sat in Uriah's office, where his assistant had brought them after the police finished taking their statements. Victor had been detained for questioning, though whether charges would be filed remained uncertain. I've left messages for Mr. Stern, the assistant assured them. He's cutting his London trip short and flying back tonight. He should be here by morning. Hannah sat quietly, processing the day's events. Victor's accusations played on a loop in her mind, raising questions she couldn't answer. What did she really know about Uriah Stern and how he'd made his fortune? Are you okay, sweetheart? Carol asked, noticing her daughter's troubled expression. Mom, do you think what Victor said could be true? About Mr. Stern using us to improve his image? Carol considered the question carefully. I don't know. Hannah, but I do know this. In the 5 years we've known Uriah, he's never asked for anything in return for his help. Not publicity, not favors, nothing. But Victor said something about questionable clients. What if Mr. Stern's money comes from something bad? Then we'll deal with it, Carol said firmly. But we won't jump to conclusions based on the words of a man who just kidnapped you. The next morning, Uriah arrived looking haggard from his transatlantic flight, but his eyes were clear and focused. He embraced Hannah briefly, then turned to Carol. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Victor's actions are unforgivable. Why did he do it? Hannah asked directly. He said you were going to make Mom the director of a foundation. Uriah's eyebrows rose in surprise. That was supposed to be a surprise for your mother's birthday next month. I've been planning to establish the Montgomery Foundation for Educational Equality, and yes, I hoped your mother would consider running it. Carol's eyes widened. Me? But I don't have any experience in... You have exactly the experience I need, Uriah interrupted gently. You understand what it means to want more for your child and face barriers at every turn. Who better to identify deserving families and students? Hannah watched the interplay between them, her mind working rapidly. Mr. Stern, Victor said things about your business, about questionable clients. Something hardened in Uriah's expression. Victor Reynolds has been trying to undermine me for 20 years. He was my partner when Pinnacle was first founded, but I discovered he was engaging in insider trading. I reported him to the authorities and bought out his share of the company. He avoided prison due to a technicality, but his reputation was ruined. He's been trying to get revenge ever since. So it's not true, Hannah pressed, about your clients. Uriah met her gaze directly. Pinnacle Investments has never knowingly worked with illegal enterprises. Have we made mistakes? Yes. Have some clients deceived us? Also yes. But we have always operated within the law and with a strict ethical code. Hannah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Hannah, Uriah continued, you have every right to question me, especially after yesterday. In fact, I encourage it. Never take anyone's word without evidence, not Victor's and not mine either. How can I find evidence? Uriah smiled slightly. You could start by researching Pinnacle's public records. All our major clients and transactions are a matter of public record. Or you could speak with our compliance department, which keeps detailed records of our due diligence processes. This practical approach, inviting scrutiny rather than deflecting it, eased something in Hannah's chest. The Uriah she knew, the man who had believed in her when no one else did, was still there. The aftermath of Victor's actions rippled through the following weeks. He wasn't prosecuted for kidnapping, as Hannah had technically entered his car voluntarily, but restraining orders were issued, ensuring he couldn't come near Hannah or Carol again. More damagingly for Victor, news of the incident reached his investors, many of whom withdrew their funds, leading to the eventual collapse of Reynolds Financial. For Hannah, the experience served as a harsh but valuable lesson in discernment. She had always viewed the world in simple terms. People were either good or bad, situations either right or wrong. Now she understood that reality was more complex. Good people could make mistakes, bad actions could stem from pain rather than malice, and trust once given required regular verification. As her 14th birthday approached, Hannah found herself increasingly drawn to the workings of Pinnacle Investments. She began spending more time at Uriah's office, not just doing homework, but observing meetings, listening to phone calls, absorbing the rhythms and language of finance. What had once seemed like an impenetrable world of abstract numbers gradually revealed itself as a tapestry of human decisions, risks, and opportunities. One afternoon, as Uriah reviewed quarterly projections with his team, Hannah noticed a discrepancy in the figures being presented. "Excuse me," she interrupted hesitantly, "but shouldn't the growth rate for the tech sector be adjusted for the new tariffs?" The room fell silent. Uriah turned to her, his expression curious rather than annoyed. "What makes you say that, Hannah?" "Well, I've been reading about the trade negotiations in the newspaper," she explained, "and the proposed tariffs would affect semiconductor imports. which would impact at least 3 of your major tech holdings. Uriah looked at his chief analyst, who quickly reviewed his figures. "She's right," he admitted, surprised. "I used last quarter's rates without the adjustment." That evening, as Uriah drove Hannah home, he was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry if I embarrassed you," Hannah offered, misinterpreting his silence. "Embarrassed me? Quite the opposite. You impressed me, Hannah. More than you know." He glanced at her briefly. "How would you feel about some more formal training in finance? Not to replace your regular studies, but as an addition." Hannah's eyes lit up. "I'd like that very much." And so, alongside her accelerated academic curriculum, Hannah began receiving lessons in financial analysis, market dynamics, and investment strategies. What started as basic instruction evolved into increasingly sophisticated discussions as it became clear that Hannah possessed not just intelligence, but a natural instinct for financial patterns. By 16, she was unofficially apprenticing at Pinnacle, spending summers and school breaks learning every aspect of the business. Her peers at Lakeside were obsessing over college applications and social status, while Hannah was helping to structure a major acquisition of a struggling tech firm. "You have a gift," Uriah told her after she identified a promising renewable energy startup that the firm's analysts had overlooked. "You see value where others see only risk. Have you or someone you know ever been underestimated because of your background or circumstances? Share your experience in the comments." As her high school graduation approached, Hannah faced a difficult decision. She'd been accepted to all the top universities, with multiple scholarship offers, but she was increasingly certain that her future lay with Pinnacle Investments. "You need to go to college," Uriah insisted when she broached the subject of joining the firm full-time instead. "This business will still be here when you graduate, but I'm learning more with you than I would in any classroom," Hannah argued. "Real-world experience matters more than theory. It's not just about learning finance, Hannah. College will expose you to different perspectives, different ways of thinking. It will make you a more rounded person and, ultimately, a better investor." In the end, they compromised. Hannah would attend the University of Chicago, allowing her to remain close to both her mother and Pinnacle. She would work part-time at the firm during the school year and full-time during breaks, and Uriah agreed to let her manage a small portfolio independently to test her investment theories. Her first semester of college proved Uriah right. The diversity of people and ideas challenged Hannah in ways she hadn't anticipated. She declared a double major in economics and environmental science, an unusual combination that reflected her growing interest in sustainable investing. It was during her sophomore year that Uriah first showed signs of illness. Subtle at first, increased fatigue, occasional memory lapses, then more pronounced. When he finally consented to medical tests, the diagnosis was devastating: early-onset Alzheimer's disease. "There are treatments," he told Hannah and Carol matter-of-factly in his office, medical reports spread across his desk. "They can slow the progression, but not stop it. I have perhaps 5 years of clear-headedness left, maybe less." The news hit Hannah like a physical blow. Uriah had been the cornerstone of her life for 10 years, mentor, benefactor, father figure. The thought of losing him, of watching his brilliant mind deteriorate, was unbearable. "What can we do?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I've already done it," Uriah replied, sliding a folder across the desk. "These are the papers, establishing you as my successor at Pinnacle Investments," Carol gasped. "Uriah, she's only 20. She hasn't even finished college." "And by the time she does, I may no longer be capable of making sound decisions," he countered. "Hannah has been preparing for this, whether she knew it or not, since she was 8 years old. She knows this business inside and out. More importantly, she understands its purpose, not just to make money, but to create opportunities, just as someone once created an opportunity for me." Hannah stared at the folder, overwhelmed by its implications. "The board will never accept me. They'll see it as nepotism." "They might," Uriah acknowledged, "if it weren't for this." He tapped another file. "Your small portfolio has outperformed every major fund manager at Pinnacle for the past 3 years. That's not luck, Hannah. That's talent, and talent speaks for itself." The transition wasn't immediate. For the next 2 years, Hannah worked alongside Uriah, absorbing everything she could while she completed her degree. The board members, initially skeptical, gradually came to respect her analytical skills and innovative thinking. By the time she graduated summa cum laude, many had become her advocates. Uriah's decline accelerated faster than the doctors had predicted. By Hannah's 22nd birthday, he required full-time care. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with his intellect now struggled to remember names and faces, though he never forgot Hannah or Carol. On a warm September afternoon, Hannah sat beside his bed in the comfortable home he'd purchased near Lake Michigan. Though his mind wandered, today was a good day. His eyes were clear, his smile genuine, as Hannah updated him on Pinnacle's latest ventures. "You've exceeded all my expectations," he said during a moment of lucidity. "Do you know that?" Hannah took his hand, noting how frail it had become. "I had a good teacher." Uriah chuckled. "I taught you about markets and investments. But your character, your integrity, your compassion, those were there long before you met me. They were there the night you returned my phone, even though you were hungry." Hannah swallowed hard, fighting tears. "I never thanked you properly. For everything." "You thank me every day," Uriah replied, squeezing her hand. "Every time you help someone the way I helped you. Every time you see potential where others see only circumstances. That's your gift, Hannah. Not just seeing patterns in markets, but seeing possibilities in people." Will Hannah's commitment to Uriah's legacy be put to the test sooner than she expected? The challenges facing Pinnacle Investments are about to escalate dramatically. 3 months later, Uriah Stern passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was attended by hundreds, business associates, competitors, politicians, and countless families whose lives had been changed by his quiet generosity. Hannah stood beside her mother, accepting condolences with a grace that belied her inner turmoil. Victor Reynolds made an appearance, older now and somewhat diminished. When he approached Hannah, she steeled herself for bitterness or accusations. Instead, he simply said, "He built something remarkable. I hope you can preserve it." The words could have been interpreted as a challenge or a genuine wish. Hannah chose to hear the latter. "I intend to," she replied steadily. At 23, Hannah Montgomery became the youngest CEO in Pinnacle Investments history. The transition, though long planned, still sent shockwaves through Chicago's financial community. Competitors predicted disaster, a novice at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar firm, with only a dead man's favor to recommend her. Hannah's first month in charge seemed to confirm these dire predictions. The market responded negatively to the leadership change, with Pinnacle stock dropping 15%. Several major clients placed their accounts on hold, waiting to see if the young CEO would stumble. And within the company itself, a faction of senior managers, skeptical of Hannah's authority, began pushing back against her initiatives. Carol watched her daughter with concern. Though Hannah maintained a confident facade at the office, at home she often collapsed in exhaustion and doubt. "Maybe they're right," Hannah admitted one night after a particularly brutal board meeting. "Maybe I'm not ready for this." "Uriah thought you were," Carol reminded her, and his judgment was rarely wrong. "Uriah was biased. He saw me as the daughter he never had." Carol considered this, then shook her head. "No, Hannah. Uriah was many things, but sentimental wasn't one of them. He wouldn't have entrusted his life's work to you if he didn't believe you could handle it." The turning point came unexpectedly. A major financial crisis hit the Asian markets, triggering a cascade of sell-offs across global exchanges. As panic spread, most investment firms retreated to conservative positions, liquidating holdings to minimize losses. Hannah saw the situation differently. While others focused on the immediate chaos, she recognized longer-term patterns suggesting the crisis was overblown. In a bold move that defied her advisors, she directed Pinnacle to increase its positions in several key Asian companies. For 3 agonizing weeks, the markets continued to fall, and Hannah's decision appeared catastrophic. Board members openly discussed replacing her, clients withdrew funds. Even Carol questioned whether Hannah had overreached. Then gradually the tide turned. The Asian market stabilized, then rebounded sharply. The companies Hannah had invested in recovered faster than their competitors, in many cases emerging, stronger than before. By the time the dust settled, Pinnacle had not only avoided the massive losses that plagued other firms, but had actually grown its portfolio value by 12%. The success transformed Hannah's standing overnight. Clients who had hesitated now clamored for Pinnacle's services. Financial publications that had questioned her appointment now praised her prescience. And within the firm, even her staunchest critics were silenced. Hannah accepted the praise with modesty, knowing that a single victory didn't guarantee continued success. But the crisis had given her something more valuable than accolades, confidence in her own judgment, even when it contradicted conventional wisdom. As her leadership solidified, Hannah began steering Pinnacle in new directions. She established stricter ethical guidelines for client acceptance, even if it meant turning away lucrative accounts. She increased the firm's focus on sustainable investments, creating a dedicated division for green technology and renewable energy, and she expanded the charitable foundation that bore her mother's name, now with Carol fully at the helm. The Montgomery Foundation had become a powerful force for educational equity in Chicago and beyond. What had begun as a scholarship program for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds now encompassed mentorship initiatives, teacher training, and community development projects. "You've built something extraordinary," Hannah told her mother, as they toured a new foundation-funded tech center in their old neighborhood. Carol smiled, watching children eagerly explore computer terminals and robotics kits. "We both have different paths, same goal." By her 28th birthday, Hannah had fully emerged from Uriah's shadow. Pinnacle Investments was unmistakably hers now, expanded, diversified, and more profitable than ever. The financial industry that had once dismissed her as Uriah's charity case now recognized her as an innovator and thought leader. Yet success brought its own complications. Hannah's visibility attracted unwanted attention, including from men who saw her as a trophy to be won, rather than a partner to be respected. Her few attempts at dating had ended poorly, with most prospective partners either intimidated by her success or seeking to exploit it. "You need balance," Carol advised, noting her daughter's increasingly demanding schedule. "All work and no play isn't healthy, Hannah." Hannah sighed, reviewing the quarterly projections on her laptop. "I have balance. I work at the office and I work at home. That's not balance, that's just changing locations." But even as she dismissed her mother's concerns, Hannah knew there was truth in them. Her life had become increasingly narrow, defined by board meetings, investment strategies, and financial reports. The passion that had once driven her was gradually being replaced by routine and obligation. The realization crystallized during a routine visit to Lakeside Academy, where she was scheduled to speak at a career day event. Walking the familiar hallways, now as a distinguished alumna rather than an outsider, Hannah found herself drawn to the art room where she'd once spent free periods sketching to escape the social pressures of her early days at the school. To her surprise, the room was occupied by a young teacher with paint-splattered clothes and an easy smile. He was helping a student with a sculpture, his hands guiding hers as they shaped the clay. "Sorry," Hannah said, stepping back from the doorway. "I didn't mean to interrupt." The teacher looked up, his warm brown eyes curious. "No interruption. We're just finishing up. Are you here for Career Day?" "Yes, I'm one of the speakers." He nodded, recognition dawning. "Hannah Montgomery, right? The financial whiz kid. I've seen your picture in the alumni newsletter." Hannah winced slightly at the whiz kid description. "That's me, and you are?" "Nathan Douglas, first-year art teacher and eternally struggling painter." He gestured to a canvas in the corner, an abstract composition of blues and greens that somehow captured the essence of Lake Michigan on a stormy day. "It's beautiful," Hannah said, genuinely impressed. "You're quite talented." Nathan laughed. "Tell that to my student loans. Not much money in fine arts these days." The student had finished cleaning up and departed with a wave, leaving them alone in the paint-scented room. "So what brings the CEO of Pinnacle Investments to the humble art room?" Nathan asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Hannah hesitated, surprised by the question. I used to come here when I was a student. It was peaceful. Nathan studied her for a moment, as if seeing beyond the tailored suit and carefully maintained professional facade. And you needed a moment of peace today. Something like that, Hannah admitted. Nathan nodded toward his painting. That's why I do this. The financial security is terrible, but the peace it brings me is priceless. When Hannah left the art room 20 minutes later, she carried with her not just memories of her past, but something new. A business card with Nathan's number scrawled on the back and a casual invitation to see his upcoming gallery show. The invitation sat on her desk for 3 days before Hannah finally called. Their first date was awkward. Hannah overly formal, Nathan deliberately casual, but somehow endearing in its imperfection. Their second was better. By the third, something had clicked between them, a recognition of complementary differences, rather than contradictions. Where Hannah was analytical, Nathan was intuitive. Where she saw problems to be solved, he saw experiences to be embraced. Their worldviews were different, but their values aligned in ways that mattered: honesty, kindness, appreciation for both beauty and truth. He makes me laugh, Hannah told her mother after they'd been dating for 2 months. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Carol smiled knowingly. Laughter is underrated in relationships. So is someone who sees you as a person, not a position. The romance blossomed slowly, deliberately. Nathan never seemed intimidated by Hannah's success or wealth. If anything, he seemed amused by the trappings of her corporate life, gently teasing her about her overscheduled calendar and formal business attire. You know, he remarked one evening, as they walked along the lakeshore, you're at your most beautiful when you forget you're supposed to be Pinnacle's CEO. Hannah raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning when you stop trying to be perfect, when you laugh without thinking about how it looks, when you get excited about something without calculating its value first. The observation stung because it contained truth. Somewhere along the way, Hannah had begun confusing her role with her identity. As their relationship deepened, Hannah found herself reconsidering aspects of her life she'd long taken for granted. The 70-hour work weeks, the constant availability to clients, the single-minded focus on Pinnacle's growth. I'm not saying you should work less, Nathan clarified when she raised the subject. I'm suggesting you might work differently, more intentionally. The idea took root, growing alongside their relationship. Hannah began delegating more responsibilities, trusting her carefully selected team to handle routine matters. She established firm boundaries between work and personal time, and she reacquainted herself with long-forgotten pleasures, art galleries, theatre performances, simply watching the sunset without checking her phone. On the eve of her 30th birthday, Hannah stood at the window of her penthouse apartment, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. Behind her, preparations for a small dinner party were underway, her mother arranging flowers, Nathan uncorking wine, a caterer putting final touches on the meal. The cityscape before her was familiar, yet always changing, like her own life. 22 years had passed since that cold night, when she chased after Uriah Stern with his dropped phone. So much had changed. The desperate little girl was now a powerful woman. The struggling single mother now a respected foundation director. Yet some things remained constant. The values that had guided that hungry child's decision to return the phone rather than keep it still guided the CEO's business ethics. The bond between mother and daughter had only strengthened, and the legacy of Uriah's generosity continued to ripple outward through their own acts of giving. Hannah's phone buzzed with a message, the final confirmation of Pinnacle's newest venture, a microfinance initiative aimed at supporting small businesses in underserved Chicago neighborhoods. It was a project she'd been developing for months, combining financial returns with tangible community benefits. As she set the phone aside, Hannah caught sight of a framed photo on her desk, herself at 8 years old, standing between her mother and Uriah on the day they'd moved into their first decent apartment. All three were smiling, their faces alight, with hope for the future. Nathan appeared at her side, offering a glass of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts?" Hannah accepted the glass, leaning comfortably against him. "I was just thinking about journeys, How you never really know where a single moment will lead you. Like returning a stranger's phone? Exactly like that. She smiled, turning from the window to face the warm, intimate gathering in her home. One honest act in a moment of need. Who could have predicted where it would lead? The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the final guests, a young family Hannah had recently met through the foundation. The parents had escaped violence in their home country, arriving in Chicago with nothing but determination and hope for their children's future. In them, Hannah recognized echoes of her own story, though the details differed. As she moved to welcome them, Nathan caught her hand briefly. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked quietly. "What's that?" "You never forget where you came from, and you never stop reaching back to help others make the same journey." Hannah squeezed his hand in acknowledgement, then opened the door to greet her guests. The young daughter, about 7 years old, looked up at Hannah with wide, curious eyes, the same age Hannah had been when her own life changed forever. In that moment, Hannah felt the full circle of her journey, from the child who needed help to the woman who could provide it. Not because she was special or chosen, but because someone had once seen her potential and invested in it. Now it was her turn to do the same. The empire she'd inherited from Uriah had become more than a financial institution. It had become a platform for opportunity, a means of opening doors for others the way hers had been opened. That, Hannah realized, was Uriah's true legacy. Not the buildings or the accounts or even the foundation, but the simple, powerful belief that a single act of kindness could transform not just one life, but countless others. As Hannah welcomed the family into her home, she smiled at the young girl. "I'm so glad you could come," she said warmly. "I have a feeling we're going to be great friends." Behind her, the Chicago skyline glittered against the darkening sky, a constellation of lights representing thousands of stories, thousands of possibilities. Among them, Hannah's story continued to unfold, not ended but evolving, a testament to how far a little honesty, a lot of hard work, and an unexpected opportunity could take you. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.